The sun hung low over the verdant valley, casting a golden glow over the village of Nyuma. Huts with thatched roofs clustered like a family gathering for evening tales. The river wound its way through the heart of the land, its waters shimmering like a silver thread. The river was more than a source of sustenance. It was the lifeblood of the village. Mothers came to its banks to fetch water, fishermen cast their nets into its depths, and children played along its shores. But it was also a place of whispers, where the wind carried tales of spirits that watched and judged. The river gave life, but demanded respect, a lesson passed down through generations like a sacred hymn. Under the sprawling shade of the ancient baobab tree, a gathering of children sat cross-legged in rapt attention. Their wide eyes reflected the glow of the setting sun as they listened to Mama Nande, the village's elder storyteller. Her voice was a melody of wisdom, rising and falling like the river's current. "The river gives and the river takes," she intoned, her wrinkled hands gesturing toward the water. "It carries life in its flow but holds power in its depths. Those who mock it, they do not live to mock again." The children gasped as she leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper. Many seasons ago, a man laughed at the river spirits. He took from the water without offering thanks. Do you know what happened to him? The children shook their heads, their breaths held in suspense. The river rose in the night, swallowing his home and his family. Not a trace of them remained. Words hung in the air like the final beat of a drum, and the children shivered. The youngest boy clutched his sister's hand. "Is it true, Mama Nande? Do the spirits really watch us?" Mama Nande nodded solemnly. "Always. They see your heart, even when you cannot see them." Some children nodded in reverence, their faces etched with fear and awe. Others, the older ones, exchanged skeptical glances, their youthful confidence shielding them from belief. But among them sat Nala, a girl of 12 with a quiet demeanor. Her gaze lingered on the river, her heart heavy with both respect and a quiet sense of duty. On the outskirts of the gathering stood Ayo, a boy of 16, his arms crossed and a smirk on his lips. He watched the scene with a mixture of boredom and disdain. "Spirits," he muttered under his breath. "Old stories to keep children from wandering too far." His mind wandered to the world beyond the village, to the city he had heard about, from traders. A place of lights, machines, and opportunity. A place where no one bowed to rivers or whispered thanks to invisible beings. "Ayo," his younger sister Nala called softly. "You shouldn't mock the spirits." Ayo rolled his eyes. "And why not? They've done nothing for us but keep this village stuck in the past. I won't live like this forever." Unlike her brother, Nala felt a deep connection to the river. Every morning, she crept out of their hut with a small basket of offerings, dried flowers, a piece of fruit, or a carved wooden figure. She would kneel by the river's edge, whispering her gratitude for its protection. "Thank you, spirits, for the water that feeds our crops and quenches our thirst," she murmured one morning. The river seemed to ripple in acknowledgement, the light playing on its surface like a soft smile. But she kept her rituals a secret, fearing her brother's ridicule. The river spirits were a constant presence in the village's lore. According to legend, they were led by Ika the Watcher, a being of light and water who guarded the river's balance. It was said Eka could take many forms, a fish in the water, a shadow on the shore, or a whisper on the wind. Mama Nande's stories wove vivid images of the spirits. Eka watches over us, protecting those who respect the river's gifts. But beware, if you defy the spirits, their justice is swift and unforgiving. The villagers often shared tales of those who dared to defy the spirits and paid the price. A fisherman who overharvested, a farmer who poisoned the water. Each story served as a warning, a thread in the tapestry of their collective memory. So, elders were the keepers of the village's wisdom, guardians of its traditions. They led the rituals, from the annual river blessing to the daily prayers of gratitude. Their voices carried the weight of history, their words woven with the lessons of ancestors. But the younger generation, led by voices like Ayo's, began to question the old ways. Why cling to these rituals when the world outside moves forward? They asked. The elders replied, the river's balance sustains us. Without it, We are nothing. Ayo's disdain for the river spirits grew with each passing day. He openly mocked Nala when he caught her leaving an offering by the river. Do you think they'll come out and thank you? He scoffed. Nala frowned. You shouldn't speak like that. Mama Nande says the spirits are always listening. Let them listen, Ayo retorted. Maybe they'll finally tell me why we waste our time worshipping a river. Upset by her brother's words, Nala sought solace in Mama Nande. Mama, she whispered, what if the spirits grow angry with Ayo? Mama Nande sighed, her eyes heavy with sorrow. Pride blinds the heart, child. It leads to storms that can drown even the strongest swimmer. Tell your brother to tread carefully. It began subtly. Fishermen returned empty-handed, their nets torn. Crops near the rivers, edge wilted, their leaves curling as though scorched. At night, villagers whispered of eerie voices carried on the wind. The village chief called for a meeting, his face grave. The spirits are displeased, he said. We must appease them before it is too late. At home, Ayo's defiance escalated. This is nonsense, he declared, as their father scolded him for skipping a ritual. Why do you insist on angering the spirits? Their father demanded. Because they aren't real, Ayo shouted. We're stuck in the past, afraid of stories while the world moves forward without us. Nala watched silently, her heart torn between love for her brother and fear of the river's wrath. The villagers gathered by the river for the annual blessing, carrying offerings of fruit, grain, and carved figures. Drums beat in rhythmic harmony as the elders chanted. But Ayo refused to kneel, his defiance a silent challenge to the spirits. The villagers gasped when he tossed an offering into the river with a mocking laugh. The water churned violently, and the wind howled through the valley. A shadow rose from the river's depths, a warning unspoken but deeply felt. Mama Nande's voice rang out, trembling with urgency. You have awakened the storm. The moon hung heavy in the night sky, casting a pale light over the village of Nyuma. The river, usually serene, seemed alive, its currents whispering secrets only the night could carry. Nala lay in her small mat, her eyes wide open. Sleep eluded her, but a sound lured her from the edge of dreams, a melody soft and haunting. Her breath hitched. It was not the wind, nor the song of crickets. This was something else. Nala rose quietly, careful not to wake her brother or father. The melody called to her, pulling her toward the riverbank. Barefoot and shivering, she stepped out into the cool night, the path lit by the glow of the moon. At the river's edge, the song grew louder, wrapping around her like a lullaby. The water shimmered unnaturally, its surface alive with a silver glow. And then she saw it. A childlike figure stood on the water, glowing faintly. Its form was ethereal, its features indistinct, as though it was made of moonlight and mist. Its eyes, bright and sorrowful, met Nala's. Why do you come here, child of the river? The figure's voice echoed, though its lips did not move. Nala fell to her knees, trembling. I heard your song. The figure tilted its head, studying her. Your heart is pure, but your brother's pride blinds him. If he does not make peace, we will take what is most precious to him. Tears welled in Nala's eyes. No, please, spare him. He doesn't understand. Understanding is earned, not given, the figure replied. The glow around it brightened as it began to fade into the mist. Warn him, child. The river is patient, but not forever. Nala reached out, but the figure was gone. The river was silent once more. She awoke with a start, her heart pounding. Dawn had begun to creep into the sky, painting the horizon with shades of orange and pink. She rushed to Ayo, shaking him awake. Wake up, Ayo. I need to tell you something. Ayo groaned, swatting at her hand. What is it, Nala? Can't it wait? No, it can't, she insisted, her voice trembling. I saw something last night. A spirit. It warned me about you. Ayo sat up, rubbing his eyes. A spirit? Really? You've been listening to too many of Mama Nande's stories. It's true, she said desperately. It said your pride will bring harm to us all. Ayo rolled his eyes, standing and stretching. Nala, you're too old to believe in ghost stories. Go play by the river if it makes you feel better, but leave me out of it. Frustrated, Nala stormed out, clutching her chest as fear and helplessness swirled within her. The story of Nala's vision spread quickly through the village, carried by her whispered pleas to the elders. By midday, a meeting was called beneath the great baobab tree. Mama Nande stood at the center, her presence commanding. The child has seen what many of us have feared, she said gravely. The spirits are displeased. We must act before they take their vengeance. The village chief nodded, his expression solemn. Prepare the offerings. We will seek forgiveness. The riverbank was alive with activity as the villagers gathered for the offering. Women carried baskets of fruit and grains, men brought hand-carved figurines, and children placed flowers at the water's edge. The air was thick with the rhythmic beat of drums and the melodic chanting of the elders. Ayo stood apart from the crowd, his arms crossed, a smirk playing on his lips. He watched as the villagers knelt, bowing their heads in reverence. This is ridiculous, he muttered under his breath. As the chief stepped forward to pour an offering of honey into the river, Ayo strode to the water's edge, snatching the bowl from his hands. Enough of this nonsense, he shouted. We've wasted our time worshipping a river that does nothing but flow. Gasps rippled through the crowd as Ayo threw the honey into the water, the golden liquid spreading across the surface like spilled sunlight. Ayo! The chief roared. Do you know what you have done? What I've done, Ayo said, his voice dripping with defiance, is refuse to bow to shadows and stories. The river grew still, unnaturally so. A chill crept through the air, and a mist began to rise from the water. The villagers froze as a towering shadow emerged, its form shifting and formless. Eka the Watcher had risen. The shadow's voice boomed, reverberating through the valley. You mock what you do not understand. Your pride will cost you more than, you know. The river churned violently, waves crashing against the shore. Villagers fled in terror, their cries lost in the cacophony. A sudden, massive wave swept over the bank, knocking Nala into the water. Nala! Ayo screamed, running toward the river. He dove into the water, but the current was too strong. Villagers pulled her out moments later, her limp body dripping with river water. Her arm bore a glowing mark, faint but unmistakable, a winding symbol resembling flowing water. The night that followed was restless. Ayo tossed and turned, his dreams plagued by shadows. He found himself standing in the middle of a vast, endless river. Dark shapes swirled beneath the surface, their eyes glowing as they circled him. You are blind, they whispered. You are blind. He woke with a start, his body drenched in cold sweat. Water dripped from the ceiling of his hut, pooling beneath his bed. Ayo, Nala whispered weakly from the next room, her voice barely audible. The spirits. They are watching. Her condition worsened as days passed. Her mark glowed brighter, and her breathing grew labored. The village healer shook her head. Her spirit has been claimed in part. If nothing is done, she will not survive. Ayo sat outside the hut, his head in his hands. Guilt weighed on him like a stone. You carry the burden of your mother's pact, Mama Nande said, sitting beside him. What do you mean? He asked, his voice hollow. She sighed, her gaze distant. Your mother once made a bargain with the spirits during a drought. She offered her reverence and that of her children. You have broken that promise. Ayo's heart sank. What can I do to fix it? Humility and sacrifice, she replied. Only by proving your remorse can you hope to restore balance. As the night deepened, Ayo stared at the river, its surface shimmering beneath the moonlight. For the first time, he saw it not as an obstacle, but as a living force. I will make this right, he vowed. The river seemed to ripple in response, as though acknowledging his words. The air in the village was thick with unease as Mama Nande sat by the fire, her gaze fixed on Ayo, who knelt before her. The glow of the flames danced across her weathered face, making her appear otherworldly, like a messenger of the spirits themselves. "The path you must take is not one of pride, Ayo," she said, her voice heavy with wisdom. "It is a path of humility, lined with trials that will test the very core of who you are." Ayo swallowed hard, his chest tight with guilt. "I will do whatever it takes, Mama Nande. I have to save Nala." She nodded slowly. "Follow the river upstream. It will guide you to its heart, a place both feared and revered. But beware, child. The river knows what lies in your heart, and it does not forgive easily." Her words lingered like the final beat of a drum. Ayo set out at dawn, accompanied by Kojo, his childhood friend. The pair walked in silence, the soft crunch of leaves beneath their feet, a stark contrast to the turmoil in Ayo's mind. "Why are you helping me, Kojo?" Ayo asked, breaking the quiet. Kojo smiled faintly. "Because you need someone who believes, even if you don't. The spirits may be angry, but they are not without mercy. They test us to make us better." Ayo's brow furrowed. "I hope you're right." The river grew, wilder as they ventured further, its currents crashing against jagged rocks. They fashioned a raft from fallen branches, tying it with vines and whispers of silent prayers. The raft creaked and groaned as the river carried them into violent rapids. The water roared, its spray cold against their faces. Ayo clung tightly to the ropes, his knuckles white. "Hold on!" he shouted as the raft bucked like a wild beast. Kojo's grip faltered, and he was thrown into the churning water. "Kojo!" Ayo screamed, diving in without hesitation. The current pulled at him, relentless and unforgiving, but he reached his friend, dragging him back to the raft. Gasping for breath, they climbed aboard. "You saved me," Kojo said, coughing. "I couldn't let you go," Ayo replied, his voice steadier than he felt. For the first time, he realized the depth of his own selfishness and the weight of selflessness. Night fell as they reached a dense forest shrouded in mist. The river narrowed, its surface eerily calm. Whispers filled the air, soft and disorienting. "Do you hear that?" Ayo asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Kojo nodded. "The spirits are near. Be careful. They will try to confuse you." Figures emerged from the mist, familiar faces, long gone. Ayo's mother appeared, her eyes filled with disappointment. "You have forgotten your promise," her voice echoed, though her lips did not move. Tears streamed down Ayo's face. "I didn't know. I'm sorry." The figures vanished, replaced by a single glowing orb hovering before them. "To pass," a disembodied voice said. "Answer this. What weighs more, a heart filled with pride or one filled with regret?" Ayo hesitated, his mind racing. Finally, he whispered, "They both weigh the same if they blind you." The orb pulsed brightly before fading into the distance, revealing a narrow passage. They emerged into a hidden lagoon glowing with ethereal light. The water was still, reflecting the stars as though they had fallen from the sky. At its center stood Ika the Watcher, a towering figure of shimmering water and blinding light. Kojo dropped to his knees, and Ayo followed, trembling with, "Ah!" The air grew heavy as Eka spoke, its voice both gentle and commanding. "Why have you come?" Ayo's voice shook. "I seek to make amends for my arrogance. I have endangered my sister and dishonored my family." Eka regarded him, the light around it shifting like waves. "You have broken the pact. Your mother gave her reverence, and in return, the river gave life. Now, you defy us." "I was blind," Ayo admitted, his voice cracking. "I see now that the river sustains us. I see what I must do to restore balance." Eka's form glowed brighter. "Words are easy, but deeds are not. If you are truly repentant, you will face your fears. Beyond this lagoon lies the abyss. retrieve the pearl of humility or lose what you hold most dear. Ayo's heart pounded as a portal opened in the water, its depths black and foreboding. He plunged into the abyss, the water icy and suffocating. Darkness surrounded him, pressing against his skin like a physical weight. Voices echoed around him, cruel and taunting. Failure, arrogance, unworthy. Shadowy figures swirled in the water, their eyes glowing. They reached for him, their touch cold and biting. "I won't give up," Ayo shouted, pushing forward. Through the darkness, a faint glow appeared, a small pearl resting on a pedestal of stone. It radiated warmth, a beacon of hope in the void. As he reached for it, the shadows closed in, their whispers growing louder. "You cannot escape us." Summoning every ounce of courage, Ayo grasped the pearl, its light enveloping him. The shadows recoiled, their forms dissolving into nothingness. Ayo's lungs burned as he swam upward, the weight of the abyss pulling at him. Just as his strength faltered, a familiar voice called to him. "Nala?" Her spirit appeared before him, radiant and comforting. "Hold on, brother," she said, her voice soft but firm. "You've done well. Let me guide you." Her light surrounded him, lifting him toward the surface. Breaking through the water, Ayo gasped for air. The pearl clutched tightly in his hand. He floated to the lagoon's edge, where Kojo pulled him ashore. "You did it," Kojo said, relief evident in his voice. Ayo nodded, his chest heaving. "I couldn't have done it alone." The lagoon glowed, brighter as Eka appeared once more, its voice calm and steady. "You have proven yourself, Ayo. The river forgives, but it does not forget. Carry this lesson with you always." Ayo bowed his head, tears streaming down his face. "Thank you." The lagoon faded into the night, leaving the river calm and quiet once more. Ayo held the pearl close, knowing his journey had only just begun. The river shimmered under the first light of dawn, its currents quiet and watchful. Ayo, drenched and trembling, stood before the towering figure of Ika the Watcher, the sacred pearl glowing in his hands. The lagoon was still, yet the air buzzed with an energy that seemed alive, as if the spirits themselves had gathered to bear witness. Ayo knelt, bowing his head low as the pearl rested in his palms. "Great Eka," he began, his voice hoarse from the trials he had endured. "I bring this to you not as a gift, but as a plea for forgiveness. My pride blinded me, and my sister suffered for my arrogance." The light of the pearl pulsed softly, reflecting in the shimmering form of Eka. The spirit's voice was deep and resonant, like the roar of distant waterfalls. "Humility is the first step toward redemption. You have faced your fears, Ayo, but redemption is not a gift, it is earned. Ayo, place the pearl on the water's surface." It floated for a moment before sinking, leaving the water rippling in perfect circles. The air grew still, and the light around Ika intensified. Back in the village, the people gathered around Nala, who lay motionless on a mat in their hut. Her breathing was shallow, her skin pale, and the glowing mark on her arm pulsated faintly. Her father sat beside her, head bowed in prayer. As the ripples in the lagoon stilled, a sudden calm swept over the river. The violent currents eased, and the wind grew soft. Nala's chest rose in a steady breath, her color returning. The mark on her arm faded, leaving her skin unblemished. Her eyes fluttered open, and she whispered, "The river, it's at peace." The villagers gasped, their murmurs of awe filling the air. At the lagoon, Eka turned to Ayo. "Balance has been restored, but let this not be forgotten. Pride blinds, but humility heals. Never forget that you are but a ripple in the great river of life. One ripple can disturb the stillness, or it can create harmony. Choose wisely." Ayo bowed deeply. "I will not forget great Eka. I will honor the river and its lessons." With a final surge of light, Eka's form dissolved into the water, the spirits vanishing as if carried away by the wind. A profound silence followed, broken only by the gentle lapping of the river. Ayo stood by the water's edge, gazing at his reflection. His heart was heavy with remorse, but lightened by the clarity of purpose. He whispered, "I will not fail again." When Ayo returned to the village, the people gathered around him, their faces a mix of relief and curiosity. He walked with steady steps, his head bowed in humility. "You have returned," the chief said, his voice laced with both sternness and hope. Ayo knelt before the elders and spoke. "I have seen the spirits and felt their judgment. The fault was mine. I let my pride blind me, and I endangered us all. I vow to honor the river and the pact my mother made." The chief nodded, his expression softening. "You have learned. Ayo, let this be the start of a new path for you and for all of us." In their hut, Nala sat upright for the first time in days. When Ayo entered, her eyes filled with tears. "You came back," she said softly. Ayo knelt beside her, taking her hands in his. "I was wrong, Nala. I should have listened to you. I let my pride cloud my heart, and you paid the price. I'm sorry." Nala smiled faintly, her fingers tightening around his. "You made it right. That's what matters. The spirits have forgiven us." Ayo's voice wavered as he replied, "Not just the spirits. I need your forgiveness too." "You have it, brother," Nala said, "and together we'll make sure no one forgets what the river has taught us." In the days that followed, Ayo and Nala worked side by side, speaking to the villagers about the importance of balance. "The river gives us life," Ayo told them during a gathering beneath the baobab tree, "but it asks for respect in return. We must honor its gifts and protect what sustains us." Nala added, "Tradition and progress don't have to clash. We can grow while still remembering where we come from." The villagers listened, their hearts moved by the siblings' passion. Slowly, changes began to take root. The river became a symbol of unity, its lessons guiding the community in both reverence and innovation. One evening, Mama Nande sat beneath the baobab, her voice weaving the tale of Ayo and the river spirits. Children sat wide-eyed at her feet, while the elders listened with knowing smiles. "And so, the boy who mocked the river became its greatest protector," she concluded, her voice carrying a note of pride. "May we all remember his journey and the lesson it teaches. Pride may be loud, but humility whispers the truth." The children murmured in awe, their imaginations painting pictures of the glowing lagoon and the towering Eka. The tale became part of the village's lore, passed down through generations. As the stars filled the night sky, Ayo stood by the river, its calm waters reflecting the moonlight. He placed a small offering, a carved wooden figure by the bank. "Thank you," he whispered, the words carried away by the gentle current. The river rippled softly, as if acknowledging his vow. Ayo gazed into the distance, his heart steady, his purpose clear, and the river, flowing ever forward, carried the story with it, a reminder of the power of balance, humility, and the enduring bond between humanity and nature. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the village of Nyuma. The river shimmered in the fading light, a silent witness to the hopes, fears, and dreams of its people. Ayo stood at its edge, gazing into the distance. "There's more out there, beyond the river," he muttered, his voice low but tinged with longing. Nala, crouched nearby, arranging flowers into a small basket, glanced up. "The river provides everything we need, Ayo. Why do you always want more?" Ayo sighed, his shoulders stiffening. "Because the world is bigger than this. The traders talk about cities with lights that never go out, where no one bows to rivers or whispers to spirits. I want to see it for myself." Nala shook, her head, her voice soft but firm. "Mama Nande says those who abandon the river lose more than they gain. The spirits see everything, Ayo. They know when we take without gratitude." His laugh was sharp, cutting through the quiet evening. "Spirits? Nala, you can't let old stories chain you. The river's just water, nothing more." Her hands paused, her gaze fixed on him. "You speak too boldly, brother. The river listens, even when you think it doesn't." At the village square, Mama Nande sat beneath the baobab tree, her voice carrying the weight of generations. The villagers gathered around her, their faces illuminated by the flickering light of the fire. "The river is life," she began, her tone measured and deliberate. "It feeds our crops, quenches our thirst, and carries the stories of our ancestors. But it demands respect. To dishonor the river is to dishonor life itself." Ayo, standing at the back, crossed his arms and smirked. "And what happens if we don't bow to water and shadows, Mama? Will the spirit strike us down?" The crowd murmured, uneasy at his boldness. Mama Nande's gaze pinned him, sharp and steady. "Pride blinds, boy. It blinds and binds, dragging even the strongest into the depths." His smirk faltered, but only slightly. The next morning, Nala made her way to the river, her small hands clutching the basket of offerings. She knelt by the water, her voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you, spirits, for the water that feeds our fields and fills our cups. May you continue to watch over us." The river rippled gently, as if in acknowledgement. Behind her, Ayo emerged from the trees, his expression incredulous. "You're still doing this? Flowers and whispers to invisible beings?" Nala stood, clutching the basket to her chest. "It's not for you to understand, Ayo. Some things are bigger than us." He scoffed, kicking a small stone into the water. "What's bigger than us is the world out there. One day, I'll leave this place, and you'll see how small your river truly is." Her eyes filled with quiet frustration. "Maybe the world is big, but without the river, where would we be?" When the spirit's wrath finally came, it was swift and unforgiving. The fish disappeared from the river, the crops near its banks withered, and an eerie silence fell over the village. In the stillness of the night, Ayo sat alone, the weight of his actions pressing on him like the oppressive heat of a summer sun. His defiance had seemed so strong before, but now it felt hollow, a shadow of his pride. Nala, weak but resolute, called out to him from her mat. "Ayo." He rushed to her side, guilt evident in his eyes. "I'm here, Nala." Her voice was barely a whisper. "You must fix this. The river, the spirits, they're angry." Tears welled in his eyes as he grasped her hand. "I will. I swear I will." In the depths of the river's heart, Ayo faced the shadows of his own making. The spirits appeared as dark, swirling figures, their eyes glowing with accusation. "You mocked what you did not understand," their voices echoed, layered and resonant. "Now you stand at the edge of ruin. What will you do to restore what you have broken?" Ayo's voice cracked as he replied, "I will give whatever you ask. My life, if that's what it takes." The spirits paused, their forms shifting. "Sacrifice must be born of humility, not desperation. You must prove yourself worthy." The trial was brutal, testing not only Ayo's strength but his heart. In the end, as he held the sacred pearl, its glow warm and soothing, he felt a peace he had never known. The shadows receded, and the water carried him back to the surface. Back in the village, Nala stirred, her strength returning as the mark on her arm faded. The river's flow calmed, its whispers now soft and forgiving. The villagers gathered beneath the baobab as Mama Nande recounted the tale. Ayo learned that pride blinds and binds, but humility heals. May we all remember his journey, for the river watches us all. The children listened with wide eyes, the firelight reflecting their awe, and as the river flowed onward, it carried with it the lessons of balance, respect, and the enduring bond between humanity and nature.